Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and if you watched last week's video, you may remember that we noticed that Pitt made his Image Comics storyline debut in Youngblood number 4. At the time of recording that video, I wasn't certain if I had Youngblood number 4, but I decided I was going to look into it. As it turns out, I do, and I also have several other of the Youngblood early issues. So today we're going to start taking a look at those. Let's zoom in and have a closer look today at Youngblood number 0. Here on the front cover, we can see that Youngblood number 0 was released in December of 1992, featuring characters Die Hard, Chapel, Battlestone, and Shaft. Now, some of you may be thinking to yourselves that Shaft looks a lot like Hawkeye. Well, that's because he's basically Hawkeye. I don't know that Rob really cared to disguise this fact very much, and to be fair to him, a guy using a bow and arrow is not an exclusive property to Marvel Comics, but it seems like maybe he could have tried a little bit harder to distinguish one of the main characters of this book from one of the main characters of the Avengers. I don't know, seems a little off if you ask me. Creator, writer, penciler, Rob Liefeld. Penciler for pages 4 through 9, 12, and 13, Dan Fraga. Inks, Danny K. Meeke, who would later go on to ink a good many Spawn comics. Color design, Brian Murray. Lettering, Kurt Hathaway. Technical assistant, Richard Ory. Color separations, Digital Chameleon, which is good because Analog Chameleon's work is really not very good at all. And editor, Eric Stevenson. Some of you may be wondering what this large red piece of construction paper in the middle of this book is. Don't worry, we'll get back to that later on. The story starts out in Washington, D.C. at the White House in the summer of 1988. These guys are discussing the imminent invasion of Kuwait by the Iraqi army. I find it interesting, however, that the president right here is not Ronald Reagan. We also don't see a feature of George H.W. Bush, who would have been the vice president at the time. So I'm guessing that while the Youngblood story is taking place in a universe similar to our own, it's not exactly identical. And they're discussing shipping out a team of Youngblood agents to go and fight off the Iraqis with the American military. We also are informed in this panel that there are more than one type of Youngblood unit, but they only have a few units who are available to send out on this particular mission. I'd like to start off by apologizing in advance for the fact that every single page in this book, except for the first page and the last page, are all 2-page spreads, and half of those are 2-page spreads that require the book be turned vertically to read. I don't know why Rob Liefeld made this creative decision. It's unique, I suppose, though it is really difficult for me to film in my current setup, and it's also really kind of irritating as a reader to have to constantly turn the book sideways to be able to read what's going on and follow the action. Again, it was a unique idea, and I don't fault him for trying to think outside the box, but in execution, it doesn't really work. We see the Youngblood team is jumping here from these helicopters, of course with no parachutes. They don't need them because parachutes are for nerds. Superheroes just jump straight out of air vehicles. They land directly in the middle of the fighting, and a melee ensues. So on the next 2 pages, we see that Youngblood wastes no time in making short work of the Iraqi soldiers they were sent to fight. It's a very one-sided battle. At the bottom, we notice that we get a little bit of an introduction to a few of the team members. Here on the far left, we have Riptide, who is a waterbender of sorts. Strange that she was sent on a mission that took place in the desert, but apparently she was available and other team members were not. Chapel, who I should point out, has absolutely no superpowers whatsoever. He's just a really hardcore soldier. Then we have Die Hard, who is simply listed as being a genetic superhuman. And in this last panel, I believe this is actually an editing mistake. You notice there's no description here whatsoever. This is Battlestone. He is described in this comic book as being a metahuman. I don't know what exactly Rob's definition for metahuman is, but Battlestone has superhuman strength, and I should point out was resurrected from the dead through scientific means. As soon as they finish, Battlestone decides that it's time for them to move on. So on the next page, we can see that Colonel Boggs is not very happy about the fact that Battlestone wants to move on without exploring an abandoned Iraqi cave bunker. Battlestone, I believe, is the one in charge of the mission, but Boggs is the same rank as him. So Battlestone technically, I guess, doesn't really have the authority to just order him around as he would those beneath his rank. So Boggs goes into the cave with another soldier who is unnamed, and they begin to explore. Exploring a cave, as we will find out, in the middle of a war zone is not the safest plan of action. I'd also like to point out that none of the soldiers seem to have matching uniforms, which just seems odd. I don't know if it's because they're special ops that they just get to wear whatever they want, though they all do have to wear the same oversized, bejeweled belt buckle for some reason that's not explained. So on the next page, we see that Boggs apparently notices that there is some sort of booby trap, but it is too late. There's a large explosion which kills Boggs and the other soldier with him. Gamble wants to go and try and help, but as Chapel points out, they are most certainly dead. Gamble in the next panel is very upset and blames Battlestone for their deaths, saying that Battlestone wanted them to die because then he wouldn't have to deal with Boggs potentially challenging his authority. Battlestone doesn't take kindly to this and decides to punch Gamble in the face. You'd think this absurd visor may have helped him see the left cross that was coming his way, but apparently it doesn't work like that. Chapel then chastises Battlestone because, as I stated before, Battlestone has super strength and Gamble is a normal human. Then we see that Chapel realizes that Gamble is dead due to Battlestone punching him full force. On the next page, we see here that Die Hard is very unhappy about the fact that Battlestone just killed a soldier under him and decides to take matters into his own hands. So right here, we see that Die Hard catches Battlestone with a huge haymaker, knocking him backwards and flipping him over. And we also find out why Die Hard is so angry. It's because apparently Battlestone kills soldiers under his command regularly, or at least with enough frequency that it has pushed Die Hard to the point of deciding he's unfit to lead. Battlestone obviously does not agree with this and starts to fight back against Die Hard. Die Hard is able to overpower him. So I guess despite how strong Battlestone is, Die Hard is stronger, despite the fact that Die Hard's powers are not fully explained in this issue. Chapel then decides to pull rank and gives Battlestone the ultimatum of either surrendering with his dignity or being subdued by Die Hard and beaten even worse. Battlestone takes him up on his offer, and then they all go back to America. I should also point out that you may have noticed Riptide has been completely absent in every panel during all of this. That's because I believe Rob may have forgotten that she was part of the story, because after her introduction, she does not make another appearance throughout the rest of this book. Again, this might have been on purpose, but it seems like it was just an accident. On the very next page, we are treated to this incredibly 1990s image. Look at how absolutely ridiculous these shackles are. I get that Battlestone is supposed to be a superhuman and possess incredible strength, but come on, this is crazy. Look at this. This is like Incredible Hulk level shackles. This is taking place approximately 59 hours later. He is facing a military tribunal. And I think we can see, if we look closely, why Battlestone is accidentally killing guys when he punches them. You may notice he has 16-pack abs. This is because Rob Liefeld doesn't care about basic human anatomy. And so, when Battlestone is punching people, he's rotating through the punch, and his core strength is so incredible that he's accidentally snapping their necks when he connects with it. So in the next panel, we see here that Battlestone is showing no remorse for committing murder, which is fine by the US military apparently, because as they tell him, all of the men that died were clones who they plan on resurrecting using the same technology that they did to resurrect Battlestone himself. So I guess no harm, no foul, though that doesn't give any explanation to the men that he killed previously who Die Hard was upset about. Battlestone is now upset by the fact that they're just going to start making essentially some sort of zombie military force. They decide that because his military service is so exemplary, that they're just going to discharge him from Youngblood and the military altogether and send him into civilian life rather than punish him for any of his crimes, which seems like a pretty terrible idea, that you're just going to let a murderer back onto the streets who has superpowers, but apparently in the 1980s, this was totally cool. Battlestone says that this isn't the last that they're going to hear of him, and that it's just the beginning. Again, the guy's making threats as he's being dragged away. Maybe don't just let him back into the public. On the next page, we are transported 14 months into the future from the last panel. We are now in the Pentagon, which is really just more of a random polygon. Great perspective and line work there, Rob. We're now introduced to the new team leader of Youngblood, Shaft. We're not told why he was given the position, as before he wasn't even a team member. Shaft seems to be a little bit perturbed and upset by the costume that he has to wear, not in favor of the spandex. This is where we start to get a peek at the idea that Youngblood is not just a superhero team that the government deploys for special missions, but is also being used as a propaganda tool. All of the members of Youngblood have a specific look that is given to them by the government. There are press releases. They really use them to try and push a narrative and not just as a black ops type of team. Shaft is joined here by both Cougar, and I'm not 100% sure because it's never told if it is, but I believe that this is Barricade from Stormwatch, which was created by Jim Lee. I'll have to look into that further to see if I can confirm. And they're going to meet the rest of the team. So here we get a full-page spread of the rest of the Youngblood team in all their Rob Liefeld 90s glory. Utility pouches and unnecessarily large shoulder pads abound. We then get a rundown of the team. We have Vogue at the bottom here, who is an ex-Russian gymnast and martial artist, but appears to have no superpowers. We have Die Hard, who is their government-issued metahuman, and I'd like to point out, it's stated here that he is the latest model. This will come into play in later issues. We have Bedrock, who would later have to be called Bad Rock. We'll not get into that right at the moment, but there's a story behind it. He's reading Wizard Magazine, little fourth wall breakage. Then we have Combat, who is an alien fugitive that is also super strong and apparently expertly adept at hand-to-hand combat skills. We're not told too much about him. Chapel, who I've already mentioned, is the second in command on the Youngblood team. Strange that he's not first, being that he has been there a lot longer than Shaft. And Link, who is essentially just Jean Grey, except a man. I'm not kidding. He has the exact same powers as Jean Grey. At the bottom here, we get a glimpse of what I talked about before. This is a photographer who comes in stating that he has to get a new team photo for press releases and that everyone needs to get together for the photo op. And here we go with the big giant team photo. They're all super cool and super angsty because it's the 90s. Why wouldn't they be? I know I've gone most of the comic without pointing out the whole trope of Rob Liefeld's love of drawing utility pouches. But my God, look how many utility pouches they have on Chapel right here. This is ridiculous. There's 12 that you can count in this part alone. That's just one side of his body. If it wraps all the way around, that's at least 24 utility pouches that he has at this point. Why would you ever need that many utility pouches? His gun is an energy weapon. It doesn't take reloads. It's so weird. I don't know what Rob was drawing here. On the next page, we get one of the only advertisements in the book, which is for another Rob Liefeld Image comic, Prophet. I actually have quite a few issues of Prophet. We'll get into that eventually. Again, classic Rob Liefeld. These shoulder pads are absolutely absurd, but of course they are. It's the 90s. It's Rob. And, you know, Prophet, not a great book, but not a terrible book. Like I said, we'll get into it in another time. The next page, we get an advertisement for Bloodstrike. And no matter how much you think that this is Wolverine, Rob Liefeld's legal team will assure you that this is absolutely not Wolverine. But my God, Rob, you basically just drew Wolverine. Come on, man. You got to be a little bit more different than this. The next page is the other part to what we saw at the very beginning of the book with that slight strip of red construction paper. This is a mail-in offer for Image Comics number 0. So the way this worked, and this is an incredible scam, at least in my opinion, you had to buy Brigade number 2, Savage Dragon number 3, Spawn number 4, Youngblood number 0, Cyberforce number 1, Shadowhawk number 1, and Wildcats number 2, because each one of these books contained a coupon numbered 1 through 7, and in order to get Image Comics number 0, you had to mail away all 7 of these coupons, spending in the neighborhood of at least $15 to buy all of these books, along with $2.50 shipping and handling for them to ship back to you a copy of Image Comics number 0. I'd like to point out that coupon number 7 is contained in this book. So that was the last coupon you were going to get. The book itself doesn't ship until at least March. So that means you're mailing this stuff out at the end of December and waiting 3 months for the book to ship out, and then another 4 to 6 weeks for the book to be delivered. This is insane. And on top of that, they could let you order more than one copy. But in order to order more than one copy, you had to have all 7 coupons again. It's shown right here that if you wanted to order 10 copies, you needed to provide $3.50. No, I'm sorry, that's before. $7 shipping and handling after spending, $150 on comic books to get all of the coupons necessary to send away for this. This is the worst deal I've ever heard in my life. You're getting 1 book and for buying 7. Who came up with this? This is terrible. I am almost positive I don't have a copy of Image Comics number 0. If I ever come across one, I'll buy it. I'll double check, but I'm pretty certain that I don't already own one. And if I do, if I ever come around, buying one or having one in my comic book collection, I will do a video on it just to determine if it was worth all the time, effort, and money to get it. And that was a look at Youngblood number 0. It's not a great book. Youngblood in general is a book series that never really interested me all that much. And looking back at it again, I can remember vividly why it didn't interest me much. It's a 90s team-up comic and Image, and by the way, early Image was completely spattered with team-up comics. It's crazy how many superhero teams existed in the early days of Image. They were everywhere. Rob had multiple team-up comics himself. I get the fact that they were trying to capitalize on the success of books like X-Men and the Avengers and Justice League, but there's a limit to it. You gotta reel it in at some point. Again, if you like Youngblood, that's cool. Everybody can like what they like, but it's definitely not for me. At any rate, if you enjoyed today's video, please comment, like, subscribe, whichever you like. I'm sorry if you didn't, but, you know, not every book's a winner. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great day.